The more advanced you get with music theory, the more you start to get into complex chord structures, long-form works, and techniques that take you right up to the cutting edge of what is rhythmically possible. I love this stuff, don't get me wrong, and it is advanced, but being advanced is not the same as being sophisticated. Many compositions featuring advanced techniques are not at all sophisticated. Any amount of time spent with jazz school students will teach you that. And many sophisticated compositions don't rely on advanced techniques to work. Case in point, one of the most touching and beloved pieces in Nobuo Uematsu's oeuvre, To Zanarkand from Final Fantasy. What if I called it Zanarkand? That's one way to get engagement. To Zanarkand from Final Fantasy X. This piece doesn't use any chords or arrangement techniques that you wouldn't be able to find in a first-year theory textbook. It doesn't feature a long or complicated form. It's scored for solo piano, and it's simple enough to play that I'm sure all of you watching this video could learn to play it yourself with a little practice. But not only is it beautiful, it's constructed perfectly. Every element and detail is placed deliberately and effectively, and that's the reason why this piece resonates with so many people to this day. I'm sure just saying the words To Zanarkand triggered the introduction of the piece in your mind. The intro is delicate, beautiful, and totally iconic, but when we take a look at it written out, it's not obvious what makes it so captivating. We're just walking up an E minor arpeggio and landing on a C major chord, and then walking up a D major arpeggio and landing on a B minor chord. And yet this phrase has an undeniable power to it. If we try to break this intro down, two things stand out: the range and the economy of voices. Piano is an interesting instrument. It feels very uniform, having all of the notes laid out in a symmetrical way, but the timbre of the instrument actually changes a lot based on the range you play in. Starting in such a high register accesses the delicate, glassy part of the piano's tone, which immediately sets a mood of emotional fragility. The way Uematsu handles the number of voices he uses is interesting too. We start with just two voices, the lower one walking down from E to C to mark the move from our E minor chord to C major, and then moving down from D to B minor the same way. The upper voice gives us the melody, but right as the chords shift from E minor to C, the single note line splits off into two voices and then grows to three voices to land on a full C major triad in the second bar. Adding voices one by one to the top line like this allows the music to create a crescendo, even at such a soft dynamic. And this leads into and releases on that C major chord. E minor to C major is a simple movement, a common movement, but there is a lot of emotional potential there, and Uematsu milks that chord change for all it's worth. You'll notice a lot of writing in sequence in this piece. Writing in sequence means taking one musical idea and repeating it, but moving it to start on a different note than it did the first time. We see this in the opening bars, where the exact same phrase plays twice in a row, with the second iteration just lowered down one step in the scale. This actually has a big emotional effect on the music, though. Starting on a different scale degree means that the chords change from major to minor and vice versa, where the first phrase starts somber and then turns hopeful, ending on the major flat 6 chord. The second phrase continues that hopeful spirit, but then turns to despair with the arrival of this B minor. The writing that follows features a longer melody that is equally beautiful. We start with a repeated note, 4 Bs in a row that resolves down to an F sharp. The figure that brings us to that F sharp, the resolution down to A, leap up to D, and then even bigger leap down to the F sharp is just a gorgeous movement. The melody by itself sets up a resolution to a G note. A B moving down to A wants to continue down to G, and then leaping up instead also creates an expectation that the D will leap back down to G. That's a 2 to 5 to 1 resolution, a super strong way to resolve to a tonic note. But instead of the G we expect, the melody jumps down a sixth to land on an F sharp. A super colorful note choice, a half step below where we thought we'd end up. With no accompaniment, this melody would still hit hard, but with the chords it's even better. The initial Bs highlight the major seventh of a C major chord, and then we move to a B minor add 2 chord with the arrival of that F sharp note. Ever since the prelude theme from the original Final Fantasy, we can see that Uematsu has had an affinity for add 2 chords. These are major or minor triads with the second of the chord added to them. It's a beautiful color, more rich than a simple triad, but with a totally different sound than the more typical approach to adding chord extensions, which adds the 7th to each chord first. They especially sound great to run up one note at a time, like in the aforementioned Final Fantasy prelude theme. Here, each chord in the accompaniment for this C to B minor to A minor to F bit contains its second tucked in amongst the left-hand arpeggios, with the B minor and F chords featuring straightforward runs up the add 2 chord. What's interesting is how the C sharp is added to this B minor chord, breaking out of the key and clashing with the C naturals found in the C chord before it and the A minor chord after it. We have a very pointy sounding chord here, but it lends a lot of emotional weight to the music. Besides making for a great introduction, this melodic figure, as well as the iconic opening bars, foreshadow the melodic ideas that make up the meat of the tune. The main melody brings in some musical momentum by moving to a lower register, a more powerful part of the piano's range, as well as shifting to a progression of 1 chord per bar and taking the big pauses out of the accompaniment for a steady flow of 8th note arpeggios underscoring the melody. The melody is built off of the motif we were greeted with at the opening. You start on the tonic, dip down to the 5th, and walk up to this G note at the start of bar 2. Instead of pausing on this high G note, we continue moving down the E minor scale and settling on the 5th of the key to end the phrase. The melody is developed in a very straightforward way for the second phrase. We play the same thing, but instead of walking down the E minor scale to the final B, we walk up the E minor scale to a different D major chord tone over this D chord to bring us up to end on a B note an octave higher. It's a simple melody, starting on the tonic and bringing us to the 5th of the key, but each movement sounds so natural. The melody moves in a way that feels inevitable. The first version of the phrase plays again, establishing a pattern of repetition, and then the melody takes a left turn into a new phrase foreshadowed by the introduction. 4 B notes in a row, the major 7th over our C major chord, resolve down to this A, leap up to a D, and then, this time, land squarely on a G note. It's just like the intro, only this time we actually get our satisfying resolution down to a G instead of dipping down and hitting the F sharp below it. The chords prepare us for a resolution to G2 with this pretty C major 7 moving to a rich D13 chord. This is just begging to land on a G chord right when the melody lands on a G note, but instead, we pivot to an A minor chord with the G acting as the flat 7th. Ending up on a minor chord where we expected a major chord feels dark, and having the flat 7th in the melody makes this chord feel super soft. And then we walk up to a C major chord, another super soft, unfocused sound, so we get this kind of vague, depressing lack of closure to end the section. We feel lost here. This kind of rug pulling is one of those things that's simple, but very sophisticated. We're not using any weird chords, no complicated structures or weird phrasing. Uematsu just has a perfect understanding of what the listener will be expecting and is able to manipulate your emotions with only the simplest of tools. Now that is sophistication. Another element of the writing that makes this piece so beautiful is that Uematsu uses all of the things that a piano is good at in the arrangement. The arrangement is broken up into 2 separate layers, the flowing arpeggio accompaniment on the bottom and the melody on top, perfectly fitting into the left hand and right hand of a pianist. The left-hand flowing eighth note arpeggios are the kind of thing that sounds uniquely great on a piano, and the melody in the right hand is frequently harmonized in sixths, another surefire hit on piano. And then lots of times, when the right-hand melody is moving in a way that would make it physically tough to harmonize in sixths with one hand, the left-hand arpeggios move from strictly outlining the chord to catching the notes a sixth below where the melody is, giving us the best of both techniques in one smooth motion. The way this is written is too perfect. Each hand's part makes perfect sense on its own, and they also work together to complement each other perfectly. It's a bulletproof arrangement with no note out of place, nothing to adjust to make it better. Absolutely masterful writing. A little background on the piece. Uematsu apparently composed this piano piece for a friend who was doing a flute recital, but ended up shelving it because he thought it sounded a little too gloomy. His words. It's pretty funny to hear he thought To Zanarkand was too gloomy now after the reputation the piece has gotten. Heart-wrenching might be a better word for it, but a little while later they started production on Final Fantasy X, and Uematsu decided to pull this one off the shelf, thinking it might work for the game. After the main melody trails off, the piece moves into a development section that starts to get a little less simple, stretching outside of the key but still with the same clarity of vision as the main section. The main melodic figure used in this development looks like this. The root of the underlying A minor chord A leaps up to E and then walks down the scale to a B before leaping up to a super high G. Houston, we have liftoff. We are once again in the upper register of the piano, but the continued strong left-hand arpeggios keep the music from returning to quite as delicate a place as we started. This melodic figure is a development of the original melody, transforming it by expanding the leaps into a much more dramatic form. Instead of the tonic of the chord, originally E minor, walking up to the third and then walking back down in quarter notes, this time the tonic leaps up to the fifth of the chord, A to E over A minor, and then walks down in quarter notes the same way. The shape of that quarter note walk is unmistakable, but expanding that first leap changes the emotional tenor of the line. And then that wider leap returns at the end of the phrase to rocket us into the stratosphere. The chords here are also developed from the A section. Originally, we moved from E minor to C to D to G, A1 to flat 6 to flat 7 to flat 3, ending with that implied G major resolution that introduced a little major-minor ambiguity into the proceedings. Here we have the same motion in A minor, 1 to flat 6 to flat 7, but instead of landing on the relative major for the last chord, we land on the minor 5 chord, E minor. This takes a much more hopeless sounding turn than the original version of the progression. This last E minor chord also transitions us nicely into some harmonic wandering that no Uematsu development would be complete without. The final leap figure is taken and moved around to outline movement from B minor to F sharp minor, back to A minor, and then landing on a B. We started off the A section in A minor, and now all of a sudden we're setting up a return to the original key of E minor. The development melody comes in again, but this time in the key of B minor, a surprising move coming after a B major chord, and brought down into a more reasonable octave. Then the phrase concludes with a slightly confusing motion from C sharp minor to G to F sharp minor, and then landing on another B major chord. The F sharp minor that ended the second take on the development melody leads nicely to C sharp minor. Movement by a fourth always feels stable in a chord progression, but then the leap back to G gives a jarring reminder of what key we're actually supposed to be in. Ending the phrase on a B major has a nice picardy third effect, and also sets up a smooth return to the main melody section so the piece can loop, as B is the 5 chord in the original key of E minor. We went on a nice roundabout journey and ended up right where we started without even realizing that that's where we were going. So smooth. Being able to use musical ideas that fulfill two functions in the piece simultaneously is the mark of truly sophisticated writing. There's this idea out there that an artist has a vision for a work and then needs to find the tools to be able to express that vision properly, but I don't think that's how it works. Artists use the tools they have available to make something meaningful. It's like Hemingway's famous 6-word story. Artists take what they have and use it to make whatever statement they can with those tools. It's not in the tools used, but in the details of the construction of the work that make it sophisticated. Uematsu used the piano, the techniques that sound best on that instrument, and a collection of simple musical ideas and put them together masterfully to build something truly impactful. I've heard multiple people cite To Zanarkand as the piece of music that inspired them to become musicians themselves, and I can't think of a higher compliment to pay a composer than that. Thank you to patron Andali, whose request inspired this video. Thank you so much for watching. Check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.